The Clement Manyathela Show, live from the B20 Summit. For the first time on African soil. Brought to you by Nedbank.
We're live to you from this B20 Summit with Nedbank, proud sponsors of the B20 Summit, happening for the first time indeed. And this summit presents a practical opportunity for the continent to move from intent to delivery by aligning global finance with Africa's development and energy transition priorities. Now, to find out more, we're joined now by Daniel Mminele, who's the chairperson of the Nedbank group here on 702. Mr. Mminele, thank you so much for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning, Clement, and good morning to the listeners of 702. Welcome to the B20 Summit.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this for so long. It's quite a big deal for us as South Africa. It's a big deal for our government, for the business sector. You have called Africa's G20 presidency a defining moment. What makes this presidency more than just symbolic? What does it change in real time?
I think it gave South Africa and Africa an opportunity to provide a global leadership. So this presidency of the G20 was in a very deliberate way, used to amplify the African voice and manage to reposition Africa from being just a price taker, or an implementer of international standards that are determined elsewhere, but to start being a co-creator, to start being a participant in decision-making when it comes to how we deal with global economic governance, how we reform the global financial systems and its institutions, and quite critically in terms of the work that I was involved with as part of the G20 during the year, how we deal with climate finance, and all of that being dealt with in a manner that takes account of African realities.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because in your previous role you have dealt with climate finance.
Indeed, yeah.
So you know that well. How important is it for economies to pursue energy security, economic competitiveness and environmental responsibility together, and not just in isolation? Because even the theme this year is inclusive growth. It's collaboration, cooperation. How important is that? Because that positions us well in that space.
Indeed, we have been advocating what we call a whole economy approach, which basically means that we need to look at this in a much more holistic and integrated manner. It's a lot more than just about reducing emissions or decarbonizing. This is an opportunity to almost design and conceive a new growth and development model. And it is critical in that respect that if you don't have reliable energy, if you don't have modern infrastructure, you will not be in a position to propel growth. So it's very central to Africa's growth strategy. And if you adopt that type of approach, you then start taking into account country-specific circumstances. You start looking at other systemic issues that need to be addressed as part of this, be it around unemployment, be it around inequality or poverty alleviation that we deal with. So this is critically important because these are catalysts and enablers to growth and development and inclusion.
Yeah, you chair the B20 Energy Mix and Just Transition Task Force. What sort of recommendations are you presenting to the G20 government leaders? What are the key things that you've looked at?
In terms of what this particular task force that dealt with energy mix and just transition is putting forward, very clear, targeted, pragmatic recommendations which have to be implementable and investable. And we came up with three recommendations. The first one is around the need to mobilize transition finance at scale, at affordable prices, on the right terms, because what we've seen is that in recent years there's been a massive increase in sort of climate finance, but it has not been flowing to where it's needed most and where it'll have the greatest impact. So that, if you wish, is the ticket to the game. We get finance at scale and affordable. The second recommendation that we put through is one that has to do with industrialization. What we are saying is, in terms of what I just said now around the whole economy approach, is that as we retool our economies, as we transition them to be low carbon and more climate resilience, there is an opportunity also to industrialize. As we drive down the value chains that are associated with fossil fuels, we need to ramp up those that are associated with renewable and sustainable energy. So, for example, let me give you an example there. This talks to issues such as, if you consider that about 30% of the so-called critical minerals that are necessary to fuel the transition are sitting in the African continent. So at this point in time, we extract them, but we don't beneficiate them, we don't create value. So it's important in that process to skill our people and create new industries that will help produce growth and in a just and inclusive way. And the third one is also very critical. It talks to infrastructure, to investing in infrastructure, grid transmission lines, battery storage systems, and all that. And you can see how they're all interconnected. So those are the key recommendations that we're putting forward, underpinned by specific policy actions that we are transmitting to the G20 leaders in terms of how concrete actions could be taken to implement these, alongside with, which is, I think, is the first time it's been done, alongside with key performance indicators that will allow us to evaluate and monitor whether we are getting the desired outcomes as we go along. So those are the key sort of three recommendations that we're putting forward.
I'm glad to hear the monitoring part, because often when these recommendations are made, or even declarations are made, there's no system that sort of tracks whether what has been recommended actually is being implemented.
And exactly. I mean, one of the key issues for us was to put a spotlight on making sure that, because for years we've been talking about this, rather than widening the conversation, the key issue for us here is to how do we get to implementation and delivery, and obviously you need to monitor to make sure that you see whether you're on the right track, and more importantly, if you are not, how quickly you course correct.
Yes. Are you getting the buy-in though from member countries, and where do you think is the greatest resistance? Because I know in the past what also used to frustrate you in your private role in climate finances, there are some countries that just are not making commitments, and we are where we are now because of them. But sometimes even when it comes to funding, they just want to give conditional grants. They are not really interested to make some effective financial investment. Is that something you've picked up, or are you seeing that there's some buy-in, or is there still resistance?
Look, in terms of the specific work of this task force, we have been working very closely with what you could almost call our counterpart in the G20 process, which is the Energy Transition Working Group, and have been liaising with them. So I'm glad to report that there is a very strong sense of alignment between the recommendations and what they've been working on. But the key issue, as I say, is how do we move from talking to implementing and to executing? You're right. Lots of commitments have been made in terms of finance. We've had the 100 billion pledge that at the Baku conference got tripled to 300 $1 billion that needs to be coming through every year until 2030. But we need to see that becoming reality, and implementation is going to be the key issue. That's how do we move to make sure that we just don't keep talking, particularly because the underlying situation that we're addressing is very urgent, given that last year was the hottest year on record and so forth. So the issues around climate change and its implications, particularly for the African continent, is not something that we've got a luxury of time on. We really need to implement urgently. Yeah,
and of course, transition sounds quite enormous. We have to make it just and not just green. Do you think the recommendations that we have seen now that you spoke about align with South Africa's own vision to expand green industries, especially when it comes to cushioning workers and communities affected by this shift from coal?
Yes, what we made sure is to be careful to not be too prescriptive. There wouldn't be any one size that fits all. So you have to be country specific. You not to take into account what the starting points of countries are, what their resources are, what their capabilities are. So this has got to be calibrated to sort of country needs. That's why we have been advocating for the institutionalization of what we call country platforms, which essentially speaks to bringing together policy, capital and capacity to do the implementation, alongside with advocating obviously for stable macroeconomic frameworks, for policy certainty, for predictability and so forth, because that is what then crowd in the finance. Once you've got that levels of confidence, capital flows.
Yeah. So we, of course, have the world leaders coming through this week, and I've been asking everybody I'm talking to around the G20 as we look forward to it. What message do you think you want to take to the table, to the G20 leaders?
Look, the message that we would want to take through is one that says that the global energy transition must deliver universal access, it must bring with it economic opportunity, and it must increase climate resilience, and it needs to be implemented in such a way that's the justice components that we talk about, that the opportunities, the challenges, the risks are shared equitably and according to those who are best able to bear certain of the risks. So and the key message is implementing, executing.
Yeah. Are there lessons that you think we can take, especially what maybe we're learning from other countries as well, other G20 members, from the conversations you've had ahead of this week? What are the lessons for us that we can pick up as South Africa, not just as government, but as business as well?
Look, I think the overarching lesson, which is not necessarily new, it just got amplified during the year, is that we are facing global challenges that we can only tackle together. The level of cooperation, collaboration, and working out what the various role players need to take care of, whether it's governments, whether it's DFIs, whether it's the business sector, and to make sure that we don't leave anybody behind. We collaborate, public-private partnerships are important, and it's key to understand that we need to de-risk certain elements of the projects to make sure that we can leverage public sector funding to crowd in much bigger pools that sit in the private of a coordination.
For speaking to us.
Thank you very much.
And all the best with the summit today. Daniel Mminele is the chair of the Nedbank Group, chatting to us here at the B20 Summit at the Sandton Convention Center. Remember, at 10 o'clock, we're going to speak to Kaskovadia as well as we focus on what's happening here. He is the B20 Sherpa, and he acts as the chief negotiator and coordinator responsible for developing and finalizing the B20's policy recommendations and presenting them to the G20 leadership. So we've looked at these 3 recommendations that Mr. Mminele speaks about that are going to be presented to the G20 government leaders, but there are more recommendations that broadly as the business sector in South Africa they're going to be presenting to G20. So that's what we'll also look at 10 o'clock. Time now for the latest in Eyewitness News headlines. It's 9:30. So good morning.
Thanks, Clement. Good morning. Law enforcement authorities are urging groups planning to protest on the sidelines of this weekend's G20 Leaders Summit to express their grievances within the bounds of the law. With international heads of states expected in Johannesburg for the summit, some groups have indicated indicated their intention to hold protests to voice various concerns. The National Joint Operation and Intelligence Structure says law enforcement will respond to anyone who poses a threat to the security of the international visitors. Suspended Police Minister Senzo Mkunu's Chief of Staff Cedric Nkabinde returns to face Parliament's ad hoc committee probing police corruption again today after MPs sent him away for submitting inconsistent information last week. Nkabinde appeared before the committee on Thursday, but his hearing ended prematurely over inconsistencies in his evidence and sworn statements. And Guinea-Bissau is set to head to the polls this Sunday. More than 800,000 voters will choose between 12 candidates, including incumbent President Umaro Siseko Imbalo, who is a favorite to land a second 5-year term. Those are the headlines. This EWN and more at 10 or as it happens.
EWN Traffic.
While travelling within routes that are around the Nasrec precinct, motorists are being warned to expect delays and, of course, road closures. This is ahead of the G20 summit set to be held this weekend. Routes affected will include Nasrec Road, the Soweto Highway, as well as the Golden Highway. If you're travelling at this particular moment on the N3 North, we've got delays between the Geldenes interchange and the Glulis interchange. There's also queuing traffic on the R24 West between Edenville Road and the Glulis turn off. If you're travelling in Calvin, we still have got those roadworks taking place along the N3 North, delays from Vincent Chabalala Road to the Baklu interchange. There's also queuing traffic on the M1 South between Corlett Drive and Halton Drive. Please be on the lookout there. More updates coming up at the top of the hour.
There's more EWN on air, online, and on the EWN app. 7:02 afternoons.
With Relebogile Mabota, 1 to 3 p.m.
How does the massage work? And I'm assuming you are doing it from inside. You're not actually holding the womb with your physical hands, or is that what you're doing?
So you're doing it from the abdomen. You're actually doing it from the outside. So like the people who are trained to do it, who are experienced at doing it, they know how to feel for the top of the uterus.
Yes.
That's why I'm saying it's gently but firmly. You don't want to be too rough that you're making the mother uncomfortable, but there is a level of discomfort that goes with doing it.
Dr. Dalsi Rakomakwe, who is a medical doctor and the CEO of Quad Care.
7:02 afternoons.
With Relebogile Mabota.
Let's walk the talk.
The sale of the season is coming. Gallagher Black Friday sale is around the corner. Discover luxury styles from iconic brands like Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger, premium denims, sneakers, accessories, and more. Your end summer of style awaits. Visit the Gallagher Black Friday sale from Thursday, the 27th of November to Sunday, the 30th of November at the Gallagher Convention Center in Midrand. First to come, first to style.
Summer is about rewarding yourself with oceanic views, sizzling fries, and so much more. Earn your share of 120 million rand in real cashback, depending on your rewards tier, when you pay with your Absa Visa card. Plus, enter the Absa Swiper competition and stand a chance to win one of 10 cars. This summer could be the best you've had in years. Your story matters. Absa, T's and C's apply. Absa is an authorized FSP and a registered credit provider.
At Premier Hotels and Resorts, business travelers staying alone enjoy a complimentary drink every night of their stay. So, whatever your tipple, it's on the house at any of our 24 hotels and resorts nationwide. Book today at premierhotels.co.za.
Your voice.
Your station.
Your open line.
Walk the talk with Clement Manyathela.
On 702.
It's 9:33. This is the 702 open line. We're taking your calls on 011-883-0702. The WhatsApp line is 072-702-1702. Stephen Groters is here. How are you doing, Stephen?
I'm good, thank you, Clement.
Yeah,
it's nice to see you. Sorry to interrupt your show. I know it might sound a little money. I find it quite difficult to stay away, actually, because so much of my world is here.
Absolutely. Tell me about what your impressions have been so far of B20. I mean, this is important for the conversations that are taking place and the recommendations that will be made to the G20 summit. You've spoken to a lot of business leaders. What do you think this opportunity provides us?
I think it does several things. Firstly, you get a lot of different people from different places with diverse backgrounds, all looking at the same things. And you might have someone from South Africa who's been looking at a thing for a certain way. They find themselves in a coffee queue with someone from Brazil, a country with, probably the second highest inequality in the world. And they have a conversation, and then the guy in Brazil says, do you know what? I tried what you did, but now I do this and it works better. So it's that kind of face-to-face thing that you don't get anywhere else, and why working from home is such a bad idea.
Yeah.
You also get a chance to focus. So if you're someone running a South African bank and you're preparing for the B20, you immediately need to think, what are the things we need to do? How to explain to my counterpart from another G20 country what my problem is? And so you really do look at the problem. I'm always a big fan of people in a room together, because I think things come out of that. Sometimes difficult things, but often really good things, because it brings people together. And that for business people is really important right now.
Yeah, one of the things I appreciated is that there has been the presence of the Americans' businesses.
Yeah, big time.
Big time. So even though the US president and the Trump administration have shown disdain towards the G20, there are some important US businesses that have participated in the B20.
So there are a couple of things going on here. I mean, on the one level, they've got to look past Trump. What happens in 4 years? They might also be looking, will this trade policy continue? They're also thinking, we have clients, black South African clients, black people on the African continent. Our president has called Africa that word. He's been very dismissive. But we need to say to our clients, we're actually different to him. We're not him. We need to sort of say, we're open for business, we want to trade, we want your business, but more importantly, we want to work with you. We're not like that. And this is a heaven-sent opportunity for them to do it. Because if you want to draw a line, politically, if you want to sort of distinguish yourself, make yourself distinct from something else for American business, this is the moment. You come to the B20, you make a splash, make sure everyone knows about you, make sure Clement and that guy Stephen are talking about it, and suddenly